everyone. Today we are going to learn about what is hypothesis and what is hypothesis testing. So we'll start with the definition or understanding of the hypothesis so that you can easily go for the research hypothesis. Before that, you must have the idea about what is hypothesis and what is hypothesis testing. So we'll start with the hypothesis. What is hypothesis? It is defined as, or you can say in layman term, hypothesis is an educated guess about something. So we have heard the term about the term guess, but what is educated guess? Basically, educated guess refers to the guess that is based on some previous knowledge or some limited evidence. I will not say much evidence. It will be limited evidence about something. So educated guess basically refers to a limited evidence or you can say a limited evidence in the form of a guess about something. So this is about hypothesis. You can also refer to the hypothesis as an idea based on a limited evidence as a starting point for the sake of an argument. It means any idea that you present for the sake of an argument and you have a very little evidence or a limited evidence about that idea refers to the hypothesis. And when we talk about the hypothesis in terms of the research, it is constructed before any research and tested to see if it might be true. So it's obvious that before doing any research, we do our homework based on the idea, what is the existing knowledge about that idea and what you are going to explore further in your research. So you have to construct the hypothesis before any research or before going for the required data to dig out whether that hypothesis is valid or not. So in your research, you have to construct your hypothesis before and then you go for collecting the data based on that hypothesis. And before hypothesis, you should have the background of that limited evidence so that you can provide the basis of your research. So we will also see the example related to that. We are going to discuss the hypothesis testing so that you can have the clear idea about the hypothesis and the hypothesis testing. Now, what is hypothesis testing? It is basically a method of statistical inference. Now, what is statistical inference? We have learned at the very start about the inferential statistics and the descriptive statistics. When we consider analyzing the data based on the sample that is extracted from the population, then we basically refer to the statistical inference or inferential statistics. So hypothesis is a method, hypothesis testing is a method of inferential statistics because we are going to make the inferences or we are going to make the assumptions based on the hypothesis, and then we prove or we try to prove those assumptions or hypotheses using the different statistical methods. So let's see the flowchart of the hypothesis testing, that how it goes on. So in the hypothesis testing, first of all, we formulate the hypothesis based on a limited evidence or based on a limited knowledge that we are basically going to prove or we are basically going to investigate in our research. So on the basis of that, we formulate the hypothesis. Then once you have got the hypothesis, based on those hypotheses, or you can say based on those statements, you have to collect the data. So in the next step, you have to collect the data based on your hypothesis. It depends what's your population from which your sample is going to take. I also give you the example of this process. So after collecting the data, what you have to do, you have to move to the next method, or you can say next step, the statistical analysis step, in which the data that you have gathered, you applied to different tests so that you can check your hypothesis or you can verify your hypothesis whether they are true or whether the results have just happened by chance. So once you apply the method, for example, there are different methods or statistical methods, t-test, you have heard about the t-test and ANOVA and so on. So currently those methods are not our target. Our target is to understand the hypothesis testing. Then after the statistical, after applying the different statistical procedure, what we get from that? The last interpretation of the results. So what does it mean? It means whether you accept the hypothesis that you formulated in the step 1, or you reject the hypothesis that you have formulated in the step 1. So this is how the hypothesis testing goes on, and accordingly you present your results, or you check whether the results are just happened by chance, or whether the results are providing you the meaningful information or not. So in this whole step, hypothesis testing basically will include these 3 tests, in which you collect the data, analyze it, and then check whether the hypothesis that you have formulated in the initial step is accepted or rejected. So this is called the hypothesis testing. I will tell you in the next lecture that what is the null and alternate hypothesis, and its importance is in the step 1 of formulate hypothesis. So currently I am not discussing that. You will get the information in detail regarding alternate and the null hypothesis, that how they differ from each other. So currently you must have the idea that what is the purpose of basically hypothesis testing. So hypothesis testing is helping you to make the inferences based on the sample data that you have extracted from the population, and then you analyze the data and make the interpretation, and then you apply that interpretation back to the population. So this interpretation is applicable to the population, and the data that you collected was a sample from the population. So hypothesis testing help you to make the predictions about the population from the sample or based on the sample. So that's why the hypothesis testing is an inferential statistics, because we have discussed about it that in inferential statistics we extend our decision to the population based on the sample. So let's have an example so that you can easily understand further the hypothesis testing. For example, a psychiatrist is testing a new anti-anxiety drug which seem to have a possible side effect of lowering the heart rate. For that thing, you have to formulate a hypothesis to test whether the drug has an impact on the heart rate or not. So if I write here, so we will test whether the drug has an impact on lowering the heart rate or not. So a very important thing here is we must have at least one dependent and one independent variable in the research hypothesis. So here one is the dependent variable and the other is the independent variable. So what is the independent and what is the dependent? Heart rate is a dependent variable as it is dependent on taking the drug, because we are associating it with the drug, and drug is the independent variable. So you can also say that hypothesis basically connects an independent variable with the dependent variable. So once you have got this hypothesis, you have to collect the data accordingly. That is the data of the sample from the population who will be tested after giving them the drug, and then statistical analysis will be done on that data so that you can easily understand whether the drug has an impact on lowering the heart rate or not, and then we can make the assumption or we can confirm that the assumption is true or not. So before that we cannot say whether that assumption is true or not. So hypothesis testing is necessary to understand whether our educated guess whether our limited evidence is true, or is it providing a meaningful information, or it's just happened by chance. So that's all from today's lecture. In the next lecture we will see what is the difference between null and alternate hypothesis.